Good evening. An inquest into the death of holidaymakers killed in a terror attack in Tunisia has heard claims that security forces deliberately delayed arriving at the scene. The victims include 3 people from our region. With more details, here's Kevin Ashford.
Well, it's now 19 months since the terror attack in Tunisia when a lone gunman walked through the coastal resort of Sousse, firing an automatic weapon and letting off explosives, killing indiscriminately. A total of 38 people died, 30 of them Britons, including John and Janet Stocker from Crawley and David Thompson from Tadley. Now, the inquest, which has resumed today, will over the next few weeks lay out in detail what happened on that day of terror. It was a holiday paradise that became a scene of carnage as a lone gunman roamed through the beach resort, mowing down tourists with gunfire. The gunman, Saifuddin Rezgui, who was shot and killed after the attack, used a parasol to hide the automatic weapon that he used to such devastating effect. Today, families and loved ones of those who died arrived at the Royal Courts of Justice to hear how painstaking work had pieced together what happened on that day in June 2015. Before proceedings began, however, the names of all 38 who died were read out, and then the coroner, His Honour Judge Richard Lorraine Smith, asked all those present to stand for a minute's silence as a mark of respect for those who died. He warned that much of the evidence would be graphic, and he said he'd give relatives time to leave the hearing if they wished to do so before it was shown. Well, the inquest is expected to last 7 weeks. Among the first evidence will be submissions about what travel advice and safety warnings had been issued to tourists ahead of the attack. And then, as the hearing continues, each of the victims will be dealt with in turn. And that will include what the coroner has described as a pen portrait of each of them, details of lives that ended so horrifically.
Kevin Ashford reporting there. Now, Southern Rail are advertising for 200 new trainee drivers. The company has been criticised for not employing enough staff when it took over the franchise. Meanwhile, 50 Tory MPs have signed a letter calling for a change in the law to stop strikes on so-called essential services like Southern Rail. Earlier, we asked our political correspondent Phil Hornby if the government was likely to change the law.
I don't think they go that far. Some workers, of course, are not allowed to strike, police officers, armed forces and so on. What these Tory MPs want to do is to make it more difficult for the unions to go ahead with strike action by having to get strikes approved in advance by a High Court judge. And even if the judge gives them the go-ahead to strike, they'd still have to provide some kind of service for their passengers. Here's one of the MPs who signed the letter, whose constituents have been affected by the Southern strike.
Well, we'd balance the trade union's right to strike against the right of people to get to work, to see their families and to make sure that our economy is not damaged. So our idea is that in the future, the strikes need to be more reasonable. We can't have a situation where a few trade union leaders bring 300,000 people's lives to a halt. We also want to make sure that they actually have compulsory mediation so they can't walk away from talks. And we also want to make sure that actually if there are strikes, at least 50% of the usual service is maintained so we have good skeleton service.
Tomorrow, by the way, the government will be producing their thoughts on improving the quality of experience for rail passengers. I should think passengers on Southern could give them a few thoughts of their own.
I'm sure they could. Phil Hornby there. Now, the leader of the Isle of Wight Council and his deputy have both resigned, saying they can no longer cope with the government's austerity cuts. In a statement, the council leader Jonathan Bacon and his deputy Steve Stubbings said they'd done their best to lead the council through difficult times, but their positions were now untenable. The process to elect a new leader will start on Wednesday. A man has appeared in court after a suspicious device was found at a block of flats in West Sussex. A bomb disposal team were called to Middlewick House in Hassocks at the weekend. 50-year-old David Smith has been remanded in custody. A candlelit vigil is being held outside the Iranian embassy in London tonight for a British woman being held in Iran. Charity worker Nazanin Zaghari Radcliffe was jailed last September for allegedly plotting to topple the Iranian government. But her family say she has done nothing wrong and are desperate for her case to be heard. Now, a British soldier will not be prosecuted over the death of a comrade from West Sussex. Lance Corporal James Brynin from Shoreham died in so-called friendly fire in Helmand Province back in October 2013. Sam Holder sends this report from the inquest.
Lance Corporal James Brynin was just 22 when he was killed by friendly fire in Afghanistan. He died from a single direct shot, by fellow British soldier Lance Corporal of Horse Mark Kelly. They'd been on an operation in one of the Taliban hotspots, the Helmand province. It was an intelligence mission near Lashkar Gah. Lance Corporal Brynin died at the scene. Today his family were in Arundel for the inquest into what happened on the battlefield on October 15th, 2013. The inquest into Lance Corporal Brynin's death originally began in March, but was paused after the coroner said there may be grounds for a homicide charge. Today the court heard that the Army's prosecution service found no evidence of any criminal offence by Lance Corporal of Horse Mark Kelly. Lance Corporal Brynin was the 445th British soldier to die in Afghanistan. He was killed just a year before British troops would be withdrawn. Soldiers nearby described the scene before the attack as calm. They said there'd be no reason for caution before hearing gunshots ring out. The court heard that Lance Corporal Kelly didn't believe he'd fired the fatal shot, but a forensic test proved he had. Senior officer Lieutenant Colonel Hayward, pictured here, said that Kelly was still serving in the army, and when questioned, said he'd be happy for him to be deployed on the battlefield again. The inquest is expected to finish tomorrow. Sam Holder, ITV News, Arundel.
And finally tonight, it will be the eyes and ears of the Royal Navy guarding the biggest warship ever built for the fleet. Today, the government placed a multi-million-pound order for a new airborne surveillance system which will protect the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth. Richard Jones has more details.
When she's fully operational, HMS Queen Elizabeth will carry Merlin helicopters equipped with the new surveillance system called Crow's Nest. Its job to protect her from harm and warn of any approaching threats.
It looks beyond the horizon. The Earth's curvature means the ship itself can't see over the horizon. Aviation, we can fly up, look 100, 200 miles up threat and see threats that are coming to her and then react to them.
The £269 million contract to build the system was announced in Portsmouth Naval Base today aboard HMS Dragon, one of 6 Type 45s. She'll also be protected by Crow's Nest. It'll be built by a consortium of companies led by Lockheed Martin.
It'll create and sustain around 200 jobs, very high value, high tech engineering jobs. About 60 in Havant with Lockheed Martin, about another 60 down at Yeovil with Leonardo helicopters, and the balance of that 200 being up in Crawley with Thales.
The announcement of this contract comes at the beginning of a year the MOD are describing as the year of the Navy. Work to build 8 new Type 26 frigates is due to start this summer, and between now and then HMS Queen Elizabeth herself will go to sea for the first time and then arrive in her new home port, Portsmouth.
This will be the year where people in Portsmouth will be able to see this largest warship that the Navy has ever had sail into the harbour. It's very exciting. She'll be going off on sea trials later this year.
2018 could be just as memorable. Royal Navy pilots are already learning to fly the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which will fly from Queen Elizabeth. And next year, trial landings on the carrier are likely to begin. Richard Jones, ITV News, Portsmouth.
Now, what does the weather have in store over the next few days? With all the details tonight, here's Simon Parkin.
From sleet to the slopes, driving through Europe. Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
Good evening. Well, if today was all a bit too grey and dull for you, with the added bonus of some dampness, don't panic, tomorrow is looking a good deal nicer. More in the way of sunshine developing. It'll stay dry, but it really won't be desperately warm. You can see that Europe at the minute is coping well with low temperatures too, and there's some quite stormy weather down to the south. But for us, we've got settled conditions with high pressure very much in charge, but we're still getting the cold air coming in from the near continent, hence the temperatures tonight are fairly low, particularly towards the east. That's where we've got the clearest skies. That's where we're down to around freezing. Bit of frost and some patchy fog. Elsewhere, a fair bit of cloud around, but even so, temperatures still down to around 3-4 degrees. So it'll be a cold start wherever you're waking up tomorrow morning. And if it's cloudy, you can see that cloud is going to be eaten away by the decent sunshine. It's only the far west of the region that we'll see that cloud lingering all day. Elsewhere, some fine blue sky on offer. Winds will stay light. Temperatures, though, still struggling, 3, 4, 5 degrees at best, so don't be going anywhere without a coat. Then a similar sort of day on Wednesday, a bit milder, though, by Thursday.
Eurotunnel the Shuttle sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
And that is all from us for tonight. We are back during Good Morning Britain, bright and early tomorrow at 6 o'clock. But from me and from all of us here on the Late Team, thanks very much for your company. See you tomorrow. Until then, good night.